Welcome back to Sean's Thoughts. You're here again with me in a non-live or a live stream, I guess, but a live stream in the fact that I'm recording all this right now in one take. Rather, I'm unable to upload them as live streams because I still have that problem with my telephone company who won't answer my phone calls. They'll just have an AI who tries to help me with my problems, but when it comes to it, they hang up on me at the end because they can't, because I keep asking for an operator. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm recording another live stream, and it's, well, kind of live. I'm fully alive, of course, and that's super important in the days that we live in, to be alive, to be filled with power and, well, joy and happiness and all the other high vibrational experiences that we would choose to live. And today I wanted to talk about, well, let me see, what do I want to talk about? These are my thoughts after all, and well, I've had a really good morning so far. Today I'm taking a walk right now, and it's still pretty chilly out, yet I've spent the morning creating and uploading different videos that I had created yesterday, or that I started to create yesterday, and I really enjoy being caught up in those frames. I just posted one to do with rocks watching a sunset. I hope you'll enjoy that one as well. And well, today is another splendid, glorious day, perhaps one of the last. I'm hoping one of the last, as we get ready to bust out of this matrix that we've been trapped in for an awful long time. Let's take a moment and talk about, I don't know, self-reflection. I've had an awful lot of time myself to look at myself, reflecting upon the things that I have learned. I often talk to my sister, and it gives me an opportunity to actually share with her the experiences that I went through within my own healing journey. And this healing journey, mind you, is really, really long because there is so many things to heal. Some people feel that their past lives they need to heal, or genetic traumas, like traumas passed down from their parents that they need to heal, or they feel that they need to heal, well, whatever traumas that they've endured within this lifetime. And well, there are a lot of things. There's even a lot of things that we are unaware of that are traumas that we're currently, you could say, healing and working through. And well, with self-reflection, as I've mentioned an awful lot, sorry about that, that comments in the digital world are an amazing way of self-reflecting. I do find taking that moment or that minute or that however long you determine the time interval to definitely always consider what you've listened to. One of the things that I mentioned today while talking to my sister was the importance, we'll say, of discernment. See, we live in a world, and for a very long time, as I've mentioned before, the Matrix has been influential and controlling of the Matrix. In fact, it's influenced many of our figures that we deem as the know-it-alls, or not the know-it-alls, because that seems to have a negative influence, but connotation, I mean. But the people that we look up to, the people that we revere, the people that we respect for their contributions to our world. And well, much of what they have to say holds valuable truths within it. There is, of course, the influences that are put there, or the misdirections of this truth that are also added into the ingredients, so that when you take out that perfectly made chocolate cake, it actually holds perfectly hidden elements as well that we may or may not know. And I know that that leads to people thinking conspiratorial thoughts. Yet, if we really do look at it, if we analyze it for ourselves, and we sit down and we look at if this perfectly chocolate made cake made the perfect life or gave the perfect formula for success, then it would be something that could be easily demonstrated. So why isn't the whole entire world eating that perfectly made chocolate cake? Well, the answer is, or at least in my opinion, the answer is, it's because there's a lot of other ingredients that are added in to misdirect and create that disconnect from 100% truth. And there's also a lot of other outside influences that we often have mislabeled, we'll say, with the different labels that they throw on everything. We've mislabeled that and took it upon ourselves to imply that there is some sort of victim state, that we are a victim, that we are self-sabotaging. See, even claiming that something is self-sabotaging means that you are blaming yourself for sabotaging. Like you're blaming the self for self-sabotaging. And yet oftentimes we'll discover, or I have come to the conclusion, that those self-sabotage situations that we find ourselves in aren't always ours to own. Yes, we play a role. We might have made choices that led us to that point. However, a lot of those different influences are background entities and background frequencies, and sometimes not even background, sometimes direct attack at certain people, that if you're having a great day and you're smiling and everything is going perfect, then all of a sudden it spirals down. It's oftentimes because perhaps you're going to be a part or connect with or do something that is spectacular, amazing, and maybe the Matrix doesn't want you to do that. And so that they create circumstances, they create influences, and I say they because it's more of a group of quantum beings, or not quantum beings, but quantum effects that can happen simultaneously. See, during the 2020 situation, we had a lot of things that were happening, and they seemed to be happening uniformly across the planet. And the news that I would watch would oftentimes show me that things were happening here and in other countries. And I remember an awful lot of people, when I was talking to them, they would say, well, no, that can't be. Like, they had this minimal understanding of how our world was governed. And I say was because it's not governed like that anymore. The world has changed, and that's, as I've mentioned before, the struggle we're seeing. However, the uniformity of how the deployment of certain propaganda techniques and such came out was very easy to see. And unlike in the past, during all of our other situations from 2001 to, well, 20, anyways, a whole bunch of other stuff, all the other stuff in the past, they had very well planned out propaganda campaigns that led people to fall upon the same conclusion. And when I mean fall upon the same conclusion, I really do mean fall upon the same sword, because a lot of people would take it upon themselves that they were at fault, and there was a lot of fake ownership given. And so people felt that they were all in it together, when in reality, one of the aspects that we had discovered through the alternative media is that the politicians weren't in it together. Actually, they were sighted on airplanes together, having parties. They were having parties on the house. Our own prime minister went to an island and, hung out with a lot of people at parties. And there was parties in Hollywood, like all over. Well, they were trying to essentially keep us, whatever word we want to use that I won't bother, but they were trying to contain us. And I mean us, I mean the Homo sapiens. They were out there having their fun all time. And that's a really good example of how the Matrix has lost its power. It's lost its ability to camouflage and to create deceit and form narratives. See, we've lived in a world where most of the world we live in within this last 20 years is digital. See, we know it to be digital. Yet my understanding of the truth is it's always been digital. See, I learned that in the 1970s they started digitalizing everything, like bringing all the paperwork over and making that into digital. And the computers really became a more modern use. They essentially became a lot more used in regular mainstream society. And yet I've also come to the understanding that the iPhones, for example, were manufactured or built, or I don't know which word it is, but they were realized in the 1940s. And there's a lot of other technologies. I remember there was a speaker, his name was Emery. I forgot his last name, Emery Smith maybe. And he came on to a Gaia Conscious Minds seminar that's actually ongoing right now, or very soon anyways, in which he exposed the level of technology that he himself had worked with long ago, like 10, 15 years. And this was a 2016 report, I believe, or a seminar. And he had talked about that the iPads that he was aware that existed were small, thin sheets of paper-like material that you could roll up and shove in your pocket. And that for him, that was an iPad. And that was a long time ago. I've also come to the understanding that a lot of this technology that they have had didn't necessarily come from them and their projects, that perhaps they were, and I say they as in the people that are distributing this technology, that they themselves received that perhaps in the 1940s with that whole Roswell thing, when, you know, some people crashed their little spaceship and traded technology and information for whatever they traded it for. Some people say they traded it for the ability to do human experimentations. And yet, as I've come to understand it, a lot of that has been ongoing for a lot longer than we imagined too. In fact, the world has been controlled by a group of people that we all have known, but for some reason, you know, mass media, movies, music, pop culture, we believed that they had lost the war. And yet, when you look into the actual history, you would see that after World War II, NASA, which stands for, in my opinion, not a space agency, but NASA actually was taken over through an operation called Operation Paperclip. In an Operation Paperclip, they essentially came in to the American Space Agency, which was called NASA, fired all the Americans, and then had all of the Nazis, or the German survivors of the war, all the military people and all that lovely stuff and all the scientists, and then they brought them over to America and basically repopulated the NASA in a space race towards, well, getting to the moon. And, well, these things didn't happen in that exact order or that exact sequence. The idea was that after the war was over, a lot of those mad scientists, or those very smart German patriots, the scientists, they were redistributed across the planet. And in fact, a lot of our companies have roots from and within that. In fact, we have a sitting president with the last name of, as I understand it, Von Camp. And yet we live in a world where we were told that one thing happened when it appears that many other things happened as well. And so it's hard to say whether or not a lot of this is true, because history has been rewritten so many times. In the past, I've talked about what's that place called? In the past, I've talked about a place called Tartaria, and Tartaria was a vast global empire. Perhaps it was present sometimes prior to the British Empire. And see, it's not that hard to imagine or believe, because a lot of our history is unfolding. Are you aware that they didn't supposedly find a dinosaur bone, although they had, well, finish that sentence. Are you aware that they didn't find a dinosaur bone until the 1850s or 1860s, when some guy out in the backyard found some sort of bone and dug it up? And yet they have been excavating and scouring the world for so many different artifacts and mining expeditions, including one in eastern Canada that was supposedly a copper mine, and it looks like it was mined thousands of years ago. But we've been exploring this planet on the Earth supposedly for at least 2,000 years, 3,000 years, and yet a dinosaur bone wasn't found until only recent. See, our history, well, and I'll actually even add something more on that. And then another interesting part of that whole thing, I've come to understand that either most or all of the dinosaur bones that we do see on exhibit in museums all over the world are actually plaster replicas, because as I was told or explained, that the actual fossils themselves are quite rare. And yet then you see these scientists that are in, like, for instance, Science World or wherever they're doing it. It wasn't Science World, it was somewhere, I forgot what the name, but anyways, also in the Drumheller museum, you would see these scientists that are dusting off all these fossils, and yet when they put together and what you actually see, from my understanding, a lot of it's plaster. And a lot of it, there's missing pieces. So if you've ever had a chance to go over to Drumheller, there's actually pieces sticking out of the ground, and those, I forgot what they're called, but that area has been a long time, the Badlands, had many people roaming through it. And for them to only find something only recently, and I mean recently as 150 years is pretty recent. However, going back onto Tartaria, is that there are actual examples of architecture that are all over our world of this vast empire. And it's supposedly that this civilization was global. And yet we hear very little about it. Well, very little until recently, when we started to hear a heck of a lot more about it. And now there's actually a considerable many videos that are going through all the different architecture, from Tartarian architecture, of course, in Russia and across the Europe and Victoria and Halifax and Niagara Falls and different parts of everywhere. I think there was one video that was talking about the Tartarian stuff in Argentina. And of course, it's hard to say what's true, because every year, from my understanding, a lot of the history could have been rewritten. And I won't go too much into that, but the Matrix had an awful lot of control over what we believed, how we believed, why we believed it, what we thought when we woke up, and how we responded to any type of aggro or anger from another person. And this essentially has distorted our very perception of our own reality and our own world, and keeping us, as I've often talked about, on that hamster loop, running after that carrot that's outside of the hamster loop, the hamster wheel. It's kept us in a state of always going after something, always reaching, always running forward, and yet at the same time that carrot was running forward too. And that's not me being a defeatist. Like, that's not me saying, oh, poor me, I couldn't succeed. I know that people do succeed, and I don't necessarily know who they are, nor do I live within their reality. Meaning that a lot of people have appeared to succeed, and yet when we later heard stories of how their lives actually were or was, it wasn't much of a success. I've heard stories of the Pussycat Dolls talking about their experiences after they so-called succeeded, and stories from Britney Spears, and stories from Darren Hayes, and stories from Chester Bennington. There's a lot of people and Robin Williams too. That one definitely was very connected to me, his story. And I don't listen to all their hearsay and negative stories. It's the point that what we see as success doesn't necessarily mean that success was free. There was a cost to success, yet some people were willing to pay for it when most people, like myself, were not. I had an opportunity after finishing acting school to be introduced to several different agents and different people in the industry of acting and such. And I was in a room with many of the higher end agents and movie people in Vancouver. And I, for some reason, chose to sit in the corner of the room and wait till the whole situation was over. I had no desire to go off and sell myself. I figure that a lot of the way that we should live is to allow what's meant to be. And yes, I guess I could have tried to do something, but I followed my gut and I just simply waited and chose to be. And should the acting, I don't know, I guess in a part to me when I want to look back at it is the energy in the room was considerably off. So I didn't actually do that. It was a great experience, the acting part, yet I wasn't a fan of the auditioning part. Wasn't a fan of having to continually do something over and over again to get it right to someone how someone else chose to see it. I really love acting. I love the feeling and the expression of, playing another character and getting and embodying that person and feeling and thinking like they do. Yet, I guess at some point in time, I came to the realization that I didn't want to feel those negative emotions over and over again. I've talked about this in the past before, how part of acting was getting us to feel what it felt like in those certain situations, and to capture that on camera had a much better opportunity, we'll say, to get that emotion connected to the audience. Yet the positive emotions, I loved them. However, the negative emotions, the painful ones and such, those weren't something that I wanted to continually experience. And yet that's another price that many of the actors have paid. Methodist actors feeling those negative emotions over and over again. Jim Carrey was a great example of, he liked to live the character. And so if the character was going through trauma, then living that trauma and constantly feeling that, well, as I've talked about before, our body often doesn't recognize whether or not we're going through the trauma in the now moment. However, if we're bringing it up and feeling it, it's going to disperse or utilize the different hormones and the different chemicals within our body to essentially repeat a lot of that trauma. And that's often why we can't get out of our traumas. We can't break free, because one of the most common things people love to do is they love to go and tell their story. They love to relate to other people about their negative stories. And often, and myself included at one point in time, we would try to one-up each other. So someone would sit around a table and they would tell their negative story, and the other person would be like, yeah. And then they would try to one-up them, tell them a more negative story. And this whole process that we're all contributing to, and I mean all, because gossip that's what I'm talking about. Most people gossip about other people. And if they've had a bad occurrence, whether it was a cashier or a teller or a clerk at a store, or what this store did to me, well, this store did this to me, oh, how bad my coffee and we get into a circular spiral into the ground with a dramatic impact, unknowingly, that we are creating a lot of negative experiences for our body, because our body, as we're telling those stories, as we're remembering and we're visualizing how that other person harmed us, our body is starting to feel that anxiety and that stress and that anger again. And then our body's releasing those cortisol and other different adrenalines and other different chemicals within our body. And then we're re-experiencing those issues. And we do that over and over and over again. So one of the things I highly suggest, and I've often heard, is telling your story is a wonderful thing to do. Tell it 3 times and then stop telling it. And if you can, don't tell it all anymore. Because a lot of the stuff, I know that that's a way that we relate. We relate to each other by sharing our traumas. That's the way a lot of people connect. Yet, there are other ways to connect. Just to simply experience something and feel something, like to be at a concert and just watch the concert together and you're experiencing it together. We have that ability, and as we move forward, I believe that our connection with our energetic world, our connection with, how we perceive the world and how we see the world, perceive the world, is going to shift. Because a lot of those overlays, a lot of those projections that have been added on or tagged on, or however you'd like to view it, those projections that have been overlaid upon us, many of them aren't real, and many of them are actually caused by other people in our lives who, they may not want someone to succeed. Like, you may have a family member, for example, who doesn't really want you to succeed, because there is another program called the fear of loss. And the fear of loss is making people believe they had something and then giving them the fear of what would the world look like if you didn't have it. The big case in point with that is obviously democracy and voting. However, there's many other situations where the fear of loss overwhelms us to indecision. See, when we have too many possibilities, for example, then we often will be inhibited to make a choice. When I was working in sales, we were always told to get customers into, if they were looking for a TV, for example, 3 different choices, sometimes 4. And these choices, we would of course have the product that we wanted to sell. We would have a product that perhaps, or a package perhaps, that they might have wanted, but it's out of their price range. Or anyways, the point is that when we're given too many decisions as a consumer, the salesperson's job was to limit those decisions, those choices, and to bring it down between a few choices, making it easier to make a choice. And the Matrix has definitely known how to utilize its power over us and how to use every opportunity that it had in order to essentially bring us to where we are now. And as I've talked about before, where we are now, it is at a miraculous point in time. Where we are now is standing on the precipice of an amazing, new, vibrant world that, right now, I would hazard to say thousands of people are waking up. Every day I talk to someone who's heard something new on the news that has distorted their perception and got them asking questions. See, that's the world we lived in previously, is they would prefer that we didn't ask questions, that we do what we're told. Just like when I was a child, I was always told to just do as I was told. Stop asking questions. So many times I heard that. Do as I told, stopping asking questions. And the other program was money don't grow on trees. See, a lot of our childhood aspects or experiences we had were all part of getting us and conforming us to what the Matrix preferred us to realize in order to control us. One of the first ones was asking your teacher in school whether or not you can go to the washroom, and then actually having to wait, having to hold on to that urine or that poop that was in your body. And sometimes I'd have to wait a half an hour until I just started walking out of the class. And after I started walking out of the class, the first few times I may have gotten someone saying something about it, but after a while, getting up to grade 7, I just walked out anymore. If I needed to go to the washroom, I was gone. And that whole example is how school was essentially telling us how we needed to control our bodies. We were in charge of our bodies, and yes, we were, but it more so set us up so that it could later control us. Meaning that when I was first starting off my career as a salesman, they actually tried to insist that we ask to go to the washroom. Like that if we were going to leave the sales floor, that we needed to let the manager know. That was a joke. That didn't last at all. I just went wherever I wanted. And if I wanted to take an extra break, I just went there and sat down. See, because all my life, I have been disconnecting, you could say, from the matrix. All my life, I have not allowed it to control anything. Even though when I was younger, I was taught that money don't grow on trees. Well, at 12 years old, I went and sold chocolate bars and made $400 a week. And this was when I was 12 years old, back in the 1990s sometimes. And when everyone was telling me that they didn't have enough money for this or that, I was a 12-year-old that was going out and buying my own TV, and I was told that I wasn't allowed to have a Super Nintendo. So I ended up going out and essentially buying it myself. And whatever I needed, I essentially went out and got it myself. And I didn't find any sort of struggle over it. I didn't find any, obstacles or confrontations over it. It just, money seemed to have no issue of manifesting itself in my life, especially when I was able and willing to do the work that was required to obtain those things that I desired. I didn't have the most flashiest desires, not until the later in my early 20s. And so, saving for whatever I needed and being there and able to help my family out. For example, on my mom's 50th birthday, which cost a few $1,000s, I paid for the whole entire thing. I took my mother to Mexico and to England. And, well, I was able to do a lot more because I believed, or maybe I just didn't have that programming, that belief that money was scarce. And that's a program that a lot of people are stuck under, even now. The belief of scarcity, the belief that there's not enough to go around, when in fact, there's far more food on this planet than anyone could ever imagine. There is far more land on this planet than anyone could ever imagine. In fact, I once read a study or a report that showed that you could take every human on Earth, all 8 billion of us, and you could put us all in one part of America. Or actually, this report was the Baja Peninsula, but you could put us on one part of America, just in California, and we would all have our own little space of land to live on that we could put our house, and there would be the rest of the world for nothingness, for just nature. See, they've compiled us and pushed us into all these small, high-density urban homes with these condos that look like little worker boxes. Like when I was in China, I lived there for over a year. Whenever they were doing any sort of mass project, they would often construct all of these apartment complexes that were basic apartments. And these are where the workers would live while they were building these billion-dollar mansions or million-dollar mansions with billion-dollar construction projects. And that's what I truly do see when I look at a lot of the apartment buildings that are being built, is they look very disconnected. Even their patios, you're not able to see. And I was watching a report, and they were showing how a style of design to basically detach people from their neighbors was making it so you couldn't see your neighbors from patio to patio. And you would have your limited view of how you could look out at the world. And that just goes to show that our world is filled with all these little, and I say little, but they're not little, but they're minuscule, that most people don't see it. They're thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, I get to buy a whole brand new apartment, and it has brand new appliances, and it has a brand new fake wooden floor, and it has a brand new community, and maybe there's a playground that's made by some cheap company, and rubber all on the ground of the playground, but I can take my kids there, and they can be disconnected from Earth while we play, but it's all brand new, and I can spend $500 to $1 million, when they were only 10 years ago half the price or a quarter of the price. But yet I can work for the next 25 years slaving away at 2 jobs, and I can succeed. Now, there's a lot of passion behind that, because when I first came to Maple Ridge, I was looking at an apartment that was just being, actually not an apartment, a townhouse that was just being built, and the asking price was 248,000 Canadian dollars approximately, and then the next one up was 298. Now they sell them for over $1 million. It's like, what type of reality do people think that exists where, they can endlessly throw zeros in a computer? Well, that's all leading to the financial crash that we're seeing, and maybe not the financial crash, the financial exposure, and perhaps a complete reset. Not the reset on the side that the deep state wanted, but the reset on the side, their side, not our side. We're all good. The Global Intelligence Agency and others are there to assist, yet all of that was just amazingly insane to me that they thought that people accepted, and many did. Many people thought, oh my gosh, that's such a great investment that if I had done that, then I would have $1 million house right now. Well, little do they realize, taxes go up, bills go up, inflation goes up. And if you sell that now $1 million house, you're paying all of these extra taxes that they've added on. You have to pay the real estate agents and the lawyers and all of that lovely stuff. You've of course got to pay off of it. If you end up wanting to refinance it and you have a variable rate mortgage, then you might be inclined to pay a lot more, or not inclined, but on the hook to pay a lot more. And so see, over 25 years, which a lot of the mortgages were, and they actually at one point in time had 30 and 35 years, you're paying more than double the price of the actual apartment, and that's assuming the interest rate stayed down. But yet, there's all the other hidden fees as well. Yeah, I think I'm going off on a lot of different things right now. I'm going to call it quits right there. But I will leave this on a positive aspect. And the positive aspect is, I truly do believe, just as this sun is shining right here, right now, that our world is going to shift beautifully, romantically, excitingly, with perhaps obstacles that we trip over. But every time we trip over, every time that we have a setback, we get up, we rise stronger. I have a video on my channel called Rising Stronger. And actually, it's not... Is it called Rising Stronger? Anyways, I think it's called Rising Stronger. I will link it here. Right now is the 37 time point, okay? So it's done by an artist called Tom McDonald, the original inspiring song. And I did a video that was inspired by his inspiring song, but he himself is a very bold man. He originated from Canada. He's down in LA, and him and his girlfriend are creating phenomenal music that speaks volumes to what's actually happening in our world. He was one of the most influential people upon my initial awakening, because he was a rapper who was out there saying things that were far more relevant to my life than others like Eminem, for example, or 50 Cent, which were other two rappers that I liked, or Snoop Dogg. I also liked his music at one point in time as well. However, this man, Tom McDonald, came onto the scene, and he started just speaking out loud and saying truth that resonated so highly with me. And so he himself became basically a voice that encouraged me to rise stronger and to be more authentic and be more true to myself, and not necessarily worry about what the world was going to be worried or thought about all the stuff that I had experienced and learnt of myself. And so there is a vast, vast world of possibilities out there. I mean underground cities. I mean underwater cities. I mean life on the moon. I mean life on the other planets. I mean life overall. And I also mean a world where people don't struggle to exist. Yes, for the last X number of millenniums, perhaps we did have an awful lot more struggle due to the archon's effects on our reality. However, there is a space moving forward where life is going to get pretty good. And it's not about waiting for that to happen. It's about putting in the work every day that we do have right now while we are awaiting the mass transformation. And awaiting is a key word, is because it's not waiting. Waiting is, waiting for a bus. Awaiting would be, well, knowing if that bus was coming, when it was coming, like preparing for it. And then when you're getting there, you're still waiting, but you're not. Well, anyways, you get what I mean. So my point is, many, many amazing, beautiful things are coming. I already see it. I've often talked before about how the smaller franchises are not the smaller franchises, some of the franchises are starting to close, and other independent families are coming in and operating and opening businesses. It might not be the way for all, but it definitely has, brought more options into the community and given more, essentially, financial independence to families. A lot of the families that are doing this are Indian or other forms of, not other forms, but other peoples from other countries. A Persian restaurant came in, butter chicken restaurant came in, another Persian, actually there's quite a few different Persian restaurants. And so this has given us a large opportunity to do for ourselves, which is something that we as Canadians are going to, actually, we as North Americans, at least Americans and Canadians, are going to have to do, is to take back that authority on our lives and, do for ourselves and for our neighbors. So I thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to just publish this with all the ums and ahs, as I always do, and I hope that this reaches the ears that need to hear it, and that we start to come together, that we begin to build those bridges that unite us and deliver us to where we all want to be. And where we all want to be is, I honestly think, where I imagine us to be. In a world of love, in a world of unity and connection and compassion, in a world of discovery, in a world of possibilities and options, so that we can space ourselves out where our neighbors aren't sitting right across the fence in their kitchen drinking their cappuccino, that we have space in between us so that we can truly be connected with nature. Thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking with you some more.